Let me show you what happens when you ask one of the crazy evolutionists to explain evolution.
Oh, how I wish I'd forgotten that the rest of this video existed and needed to be responded to. But I'm in a sciencey mood today, so let's jump back in and tackle the second half of Evolution Scientifically Debunked. And yes, the speed up on the next section is done by me, because he uses a clip that is over a minute long here and doesn't really prove any sort of point, and I don't really want to make you sit through it at normal speed.
Change, but not that fast. Now here's a dam that humans put here, and over here is a fish ladder. And here's the idea. Fish can swim from step to step and get up the ladder and get up past the dam. You see what I'm saying? But you see one fish, one big salmon over there? I mean, salmon are big. You see one? Not one. I mean, salmon are like this. You think I'm telling you fish are big fish. But they're over there, you'd notice them. And some people say the sea lions are eating them. Well, the sea lions might eat a few fish. Maybe they eat a lot of fish. But they don't eat this many fish. It means a lot of fish that aren't getting past the dam. They aren't getting up to see this fish ladder because humans have changed their environment. Humans have let silt come downstream, chemicals get in the water, they dam the strip all together so the salmon can't swim past. And you know what else? It's not one person. Millions and millions of humans slowly degrading the streams, made the environment not so good. You got no salmon. You know what I'm saying? Because humans have changed the environment. Now, a fish could adapt. It could evolve. But it would take millions and millions of years. It's not going to happen in 100 years. It's not going to happen in a weekend. It takes a long, long time. Humans have changed the environment faster than most living things can keep up.
Yes, to somebody who does not understand the context of Bill Nye's show, it would indeed seem that he's crazy. However, it's important to remember that Bill Nye in this clip is attempting to make science palatable to children. With this in mind, all of the zany sound effects and crazy camera angles make perfect sense, not to mention the fact that very little of what he just said was him quote-unquote explaining evolution at all. Most of that clip is simply discussing the changes that humans have caused to the environment that act as the selective pressure to force organisms to evolve. And if you listen to what he's saying, it actually does make a lot of sense, whether you can manage to comprehend a lesson on a children's show or not.
I think evolution is in trouble. Let's look at some other facts.
In order to look at, as you say, some other facts, we would first need to have seen some facts at all to begin with. Maybe you can provide at least one over the rest of this video.
The living fossil fish proves evolution is wrong. This fish was claimed to be a transitional form with half-formed legs and primitive lungs, ready to transition onto land.
Ah yes, this fish. Very descriptive. Can I get an actual name so I can combat your claims, or is the whole idea of this just to make shit up so nobody can disprove you easily?
This myth was exploded in December 1938, when a living one was caught in a fisherman's net off the eastern coast of South Africa.
Okay, there it is. Something I can use for research, and having now looked it up, you are, as I thought, referring to the coelacanth. Now let's revisit your previous claim.
This fish was claimed to be a transitional form with half-formed legs and primitive lungs, ready to transition onto land.
The coelacanth is what's known as a lobe-finned fish. More specifically, it follows the oldest known living lineage of Sarcopterygiae. What this means is that the lobe-finned fish line diverged significantly from the rest of the ray-finned fish over the course of millions of years of evolution, and as such, the reason it is considered to be so closely related to terrestrial tetrapods is because it is this line that eventually gave rise to the amphibians and reptiles that gradually moved onto land. One of the most significant features of the coelacanth that links it to eventual tetrapods is its auditory system, relying on an inner ear that is composed of epithelial cells much like the tetrapods that eventually came from a divergent lineage of the coelacanth. In addition to this, the most recent shared ancestor of the coelacanth according to DNA analysis in 2013 is the lungfish, which is a fish that can breathe air.
This myth was exploded in December 1938, when a living one was caught in a fisherman's net off the eastern coast of South Africa.
And once again, since we now have all that cleared up, I guess I should also mention that finding a living coelacanth does nothing to falsify the idea that coelacanths were an important transitional species on the road from ray-finned fish to primitive tetrapods.
It is now known that the natives of Comoro Island had been catching and eating the fish for years. It did not have half-formed legs or primitive lungs. It was simply a regular fish that people thought was extinct.
Actually, the coelacanth does have something of a vestigial lung structure, and as far as legs go, I have a feeling you simply misunderstood a step on the road from fins to legs as has half-formed structures that I would personally consider to be leg-like.
Single-cell complexity proves evolution is wrong. Scientists a century ago believed the smallest single living cell was a simple life form. The theory developed that perhaps lightning struck a pond of water, causing several molecules to combine in a random way, which by chance resulted in a living cell.
No, not quite. I could do my best to slog through my own very basic understanding of abiogenesis, that being what you are now currently talking about, but that is unproductive for multiple reasons. Firstly, because abiogenesis has absolutely nothing to do with biological evolution. As for biological evolution to occur, there must first be some sort of biology to evolve, and as such, this tangent does nothing in aiding your case. Secondly, because my explanation will not be nearly as well spoken or clear as a video on the subject created by Aaron Ra, which I will link in the description down below.
The cell then divided and evolved into higher life forms. This view is now proven to be immature to the degree of being ridiculous. The theory of evolution claims that organic life was created from inorganic matter. That is impossible.
The theory of evolution makes no such claim. The theory of evolution, as I believe we touched on in part 1 of this response, makes absolutely no claim at all regarding the formation of the universe, the Earth, or the first living thing. Why? Because the theory of evolution is a biological theory, and in order for a biological process to begin, you must first have something alive to do it. Evolution started after the first life form emerged. What's great about that is that even if it was your god that happened to start out life by creating the first cell and letting life arise naturally from that first cell, as some people tend to believe, it still would not disprove the theory of evolution.
The conclusion that Darwin reached, and I think many naturalists reach naturally, is that we're all to have a common ancestor. We're all descended from the same thing, whatever that thing is. And people throw out the word single-celled organism, archaea, or something like this. But there's no evidence on Earth so far that there's any other way to do it except with DNA. So the thing that is fascinating is Charles Darwin wrote this book where he has the theory and the experiments. He was quite a diligent experimenter in one volume. And he didn't know about DNA. Yes. He didn't know about genes as such, genetics. He didn't know what we think of as genes. He didn't know chromosomes, really. He just was like jamming, looking at his collections and reaching amazing conclusions, world-changing conclusions. Gotta respect that.
Which have since been confirmed.
Oh man, every which way.
and
Every which way.
chromosomes
Oh, yeah.
and genes.
I have absolutely no idea why you inserted this second Bill Nye clip here without any context or response, nor do I have any idea why you put a WTF bubble over Neil deGrasse Tyson's head when he also believes in the theory of evolution, as all scientists should.
DNA error checking proves evolution is wrong. The DNA repair process proves that evolution is wrong. It's a fact that any attempt by the DNA to change is stopped and reversed.
No, that is not a fact just because you claim that it is. While our bodies and the cells that make them up are very complex and have remarkable ways of righting themselves when problems arise, there are always going to be imperfections that slip through, which is what we see.
Mutations, or DNA replication errors, are the result of DNA that is replicated with damage that passes on to the offspring. Mutations are very rare because of DNA checking and repair. However, 1 in every 10 million duplications of a DNA molecule can result in a mutation.
Wow, only 1 in 10 million DNA divisions can result in a mutation? Those are some crazy low odds. I'll bet I've never even had a mutation occur in any of my cells in my whole life with odds like that. You know, except for the fact that the average person loses upwards of 50 million skin cells every day, so that is, in our skin alone, a possibility of around 5 mutations per day. Ready to get even crazier? The average adult man produces about 290 million sperm cells each day, which, as you seem to misunderstand, are the only cells that actually matter when passing mutations down to offspring. This means that each day a man produces around 29 mutated sperm cells, assuming your statistics of 1 in 10 million are even remotely correct, which, based on the rest of this video, I would tend to doubt.
The mutation changes are random. Unpredictable errors that cause crippling diseases, loss of function, and the destruction of the host person or animal.
Yes, sometimes mutations do cause all of those things, and when that happens, the creature that contains said mutation generally does not survive long enough to reproduce, thus limiting the passage of those mutations onto future generations. Meanwhile, the beneficial mutations, even if we assume that they are much more rare, will be the ones that help the organism survive long enough to reproduce, and thus become the gene that gets passed on and becomes more prevalent in a population. That's called natural selection.
Mutations destroy the species. They do not improve the species. Mutations never lead to a new species as falsely claimed by evolutionists.
Wow, there is nothing I love more than somebody who is scientifically illiterate making bullshit claims that fly in the face of everything that science knows to be true, touts his claims as fact, and then does not provide any valid evidence to support his position. Slow clap for you, sir.
Order out of chaos proves evolution is wrong. The second law of thermodynamics proves that organization cannot flow from chaos. Complex life organisms cannot rearrange themselves into an organism of a higher form.
Try again. Next.
This is scientifically backwards according to the second law of thermodynamics, which has never been proven wrong. This scientific law actually refutes and contradicts the theory of evolution in its entirety.
No, it doesn't, and even if it did, we've already established in the previous video that, much to your dismay, a scientific theory has much more explanatory power than a scientific law.
Chromosome count proves evolution is wrong. There is no scientific evidence that a species can change the number of chromosomes within the DNA. Each species is locked into its chromosome count that cannot be changed. If an animal developed an extra chromosome or lost a chromosome because of some deformity, it could not successfully mate. The defect could not be passed along to the next generation.
Here you've run into the problem of taking what you know about one species, that being that humans do not generally survive if they're born with a different number of chromosomes, and wrongfully extrapolating that onto the entirety of the biological spectrum. What is fatal for one species is simply another source of variation in another.
Evolutionists just throw up their hands at the question of the origin of matter because they know something cannot evolve from nothing.
The origin of matter has nothing at all to do with evolution.
They stick their hands in the sand and ignore the problem.
Actually, evolutionists, as you call them, or as I like to call them, scientists, do not stick their heads in the sand and ignore what they don't yet know. They spend their lives searching for solutions to new problems, while ignorant science-denying people like yourself come along and decide that, despite it being their field of expertise, and despite there being no reason that the scientists should not have a better understanding of it than you do, you don't need to accept the scientific facts that are simply known to be true. People piss me off.
The Big Bang Theory doesn't solve the problem either. Matter and energy have to come from somewhere.
The Big Bang model is not any less valid just because you personally misunderstand it. Oh, and like most other things in this video, the Big Bang model has absolutely nothing to do with evolution. So did he do it? Did he disprove the theory of evolution in 12 minutes as he set out to do? I'll let you be the judge of that, but I'm kinda gonna think less of you if you think he did. Honestly, at this point, I don't really know what to say here that hasn't already been said 100 times before. Evolution is a fact. Accept it. Or don't, but just know that no matter how hard you fight reality, it does not give a shit about your feelings, and it will not bend to your will or to the will of any non-existent god you decide to come up with. Anyway, that's the end for this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and a comment down below with suggestions for videos you'd like to see me cover in the future. Subscribe for future content, and as always, have a blessed day, fellow heathens.